Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Code for Kids Foundation Phase CAPS Coding and Robotics webinar. We are so thrilled to have you all joining us today. We know that the Western Cape here in South Africa has been having a little bit of unpredictable weather, so we hope you are keeping warm. We hope you're keeping dry. And we hope to all of you in Joburg joining us are having a lovely time with this nice warm weather. We are so thrilled to have thousands of teachers, school admin staff, principals, education specialists, and stakeholders in the education sector joining us today. This session really aims to unpack the recently released Coding and Robotics CAPS document with the help of our superb expert panelists. ICT and digital skills curriculum is what we live and breathe at Code4Kids. So we are so excited to have the chance to facilitate this discussion and provide some valuable insights into the new CAPS document. So just some housekeeping before we get going. I know we all know Zoom. Zoom webinars has a Q&A tab as well as a chat tab. If you have any questions for our amazing panelists, please do use of the Q&A tab. We will monitor this closely and we'll have some time for you to ask your questions to the panelists. If you've got any comments, if you've got any feedback for us, share it in the chat tab. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know how it's going. We will try our very best to get to as many of your questions as possible. So in the next hour, we'll be diving deep into what the CAPS curriculum is and what impact it has on teachers and on schools. We'll share everything we know about the CAPS curriculum and what the next steps are for schools and for teachers. We've had some great questions submitted from the audience, and we'll be sure to get our expert panelists to answer the most commonly asked ones. If you haven't managed to read the curriculum as yet, we highly recommend you do. After this webinar, we will share the curriculum document, many free resources, and a recording of today's session with you in a post-webinar email. In the coming months, Code4Kids will also host some training workshops for teachers that are looking for practical tips on how to implement the curriculum. So keep a lookout for these. I'll also share more information about this at the end of today's session. And lastly, very excitingly, because our teachers come first, we have a few surprise giveaways up for grabs for both our teachers and for one lucky school. And I'll share this at the end of the session. So do stick around until the end. I'd like to start now by introducing Matthew Henschel, CEO and founder of Code4Kids, to tell you a little bit more about Code4Kids and why we are so excited to be celebrating this amazing curriculum with you.
Thank you, Demi, and it's unbelievable to see how many people have joined this call. There's really been thousands of teachers that have registered here, which is really amazing, and I hope you get the absolute maximum value today. So I'll keep this very short. I'm one of the founders of Code4Kids, and 8 years ago, we started teaching coding and robotics in schools in South Africa. And since that very first day, there have been two things that we have always focused on doing. First and foremost, everything is about the teacher. We know that the most important part in a successful education is a supported teacher. We visited hundreds of schools and classrooms around South Africa and the world, and where we see a passionate teacher, we see students excelling. So the most important part in everything we focus on in our company is about supporting the teacher. So that's what today is. Today is really all about our teachers and getting everyone upskilled. I think we've been overwhelmed at the response to this webinar. After teachers, the second thing that we started this company with the aims of doing is we desperately want to equip students with real world skills, skills that they can take into the real world to advance their career. that is what we're doing. We try to bridge the gap from what the world needs to the classroom. 8 years ago, I was teaching my niece to code, and today we are really celebrating what the DBE has done to bring coding and robotics into the school curriculum. It's a massive, massive leap forward. I know that there's many customers of Code4Kids in the audience. I'm seeing some amazing familiar names pop in. I know there's many people using our free Term 1 and Foundation Phase resources. And I know there's many people who've never heard of us, but as I just said, everything here, I just want to say a massive welcome. We're here to support our teachers in South Africa. I hope the next hour is a big help. We're going to have, as Demi mentioned, free resources we're going to send after this, as well as the free teacher trainings we're going to be rolling out online in South Africa over the next couple of months. But we've also got some amazing panelists here, from expert teachers with years of experience to even people who were involved in creating the curriculum. We've had tons of questions come to us the last couple of days, and I'm sure there'll be more today. And we're going to endeavor to answer as much as we can in this webinar. But in closing, I really want to make sure that everyone has their questions answered. I know there's already people who we are emailing to answer your questions, but I'm going to personally drop my email in the chat right away. And if there's absolutely any question that you as a teacher need to know or have and looking for answers on how to implement coding robotics next year, what does it mean with the curriculum? What does the department need from you? I will make sure your emails gets answered. That's really all from me. Back to you. Thank you, Demi, and I really hope it's a great hour.
Thank you so much, Matt. Today, we are honored to have such a wide variety of schools and teachers here with us. We have teachers from all over the country and from all different types of schools. This makes us incredibly happy, as coding and robotics is an essential skill for tackling everyday challenges and will become a part of school life as we know it. From your responses to a form sent out earlier this week, we have found the following information. About 46% of our attendees are from schools where no coding is currently taking place. Interestingly, less than 20% of schools incorporate coding lessons utilizing both computer and non-computer based methods. And a very, very small percent of 5% of schools are using advanced computer labs. We also found that the top 3 areas of concern regarding the CAPS curriculum are training teachers, understanding the curriculum, and assessment. And today we're really going to try to unpack these and help you better understand these areas. What was great to see, though, is that 65% of our teachers are extremely excited about the curriculum, with the other 35% only being somewhat nervous. A big thank you to all of you that participated in our survey. It is truly remarkable to have such a wide-ranging audience with us here today and to have your valuable feedback shared. But on to what we came for today. Let's start by meeting our amazing panelists. Ashrik Don is the Deputy Chief Education Specialist in the Western Cape. With over 22 years of experience spanning all educational levels in South Africa and beyond, Ashrik has played an important role in the development of the recently released CAPS Coding and Robotics Curriculum. Ashrik, thank you so much for joining us here today. Please take a minute to share with us a little bit more about yourself and your role.
Thank you, Debbie. Really appreciate it. I'm just a servant of education and a passionate teacher as well. So for myself, my journey is started simply from IT. It's my background, and moved into teaching, which is my passion. And for the last how many years, my focus was on either teaching CAT, and then transition into the e-learning space, and transition seamlessly into the coding and robotics space, and where I'm now as an official implementing coding and robotics in all our schools in the Western Cape, which is our mandate at the Western Cape Education Department. And so also for all the other provinces. So from my side, I'm very excited to be here and to share. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashrik. Jackie Fouché is our head of curriculum here at Code4Kids. With over 17 years of experience in the education field, Jackie excels in computing, coding, and robotics, and specializes in integrating robotics and coding across various subjects. Welcome, Jackie, and thank you for joining us today. Please share a little bit more about yourself with us.
Hi and welcome everybody. I am very excited to be here. I haven't been out of the classroom that long, and one of the things they don't tell you when you leave teaching is you miss your colleagues. So I have missed teachers, I've missed colleagues, so it's really great to be around you again today. Thanks, Demi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. And lastly, we have Lulu Berger, who's a digital learning coach at St. Stithians Boys College. Lulu has extensive experience in educational technology across South African schools. She currently empowers educators across the nation in the use of EdTech tools. Lulu, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Demi. Thanks for the opportunity to address so many teachers out there. I've always had a passion for teachers because I think they are the most special people in the world. And yeah, my journey started probably in 2010 when the first iPad came out. And that was an iPad without it didn't even have a camera. But for me, it was never about the technology. It's more about our students and how we can help them to cope in the world. And I do think our students, they're always like a little bit of a step ahead of us. So I'm very excited about this curriculum because I think it starts them earlier as you know, in the past, and that hopefully this will build in our era of AI that we're going into, real world learners, people who can think critically, question deeply, and I'm really excited about that. Thanks, Demi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lulu. It is so great to have our stellar expert panelists here with us, and a big thank you for joining us. But let's get started with what you came here for. Let's dive into our panel discussion. With so much information going out about CAPS, let's start by unpacking what the curriculum actually means for schools and for teachers. Ashrik, can you share with us what it all means for teachers in schools and what would be required for them to get started?
Thank you, Debbie. I think, colleagues, in terms of what is expected, one of the first things you should do is going through the document, understanding the curriculum framework. What is the content, the learning objectives of the new curriculum, and also reviewing the annexures right at the end. They're touching on also on assessment. So I think number one is going through the document, then also the professional development that is needed for the subject. So if you're in the Western Cape or in any other province, there will be trainings rolled out, starting with foundation phase. So my plea is to attend these workshops, training sessions, specifically designed for coding and robotics. And because we'll be looking at two things here. This is the skills that the teacher need, the technical skills, for example, knowing if in the grade 4 to grade 9 phase, intercent phase, how do I code, for example, with block-based coding, which will be one of the platforms. The curriculum doesn't state, for example, that it needs to be a specific block-based software. What we recommend as well is Scratch, because it's loads of resources available, loads of activities, tutorials that you can use that can guide you through this journey. So the one aspect is the technical skill that you need to develop and how to actually code in Scratch or any block-based IDE. Then there is the pedagogical strategies in terms of how do I teach coding and robotics. And also in the curriculum, if you work through it, there is 5 approaches in terms of how do I need to teach coding and robotics. But I will touch on that later on in the session. And then if you look at our foundation phase, the integration of the unplugged activities is to understand what is unplugged, number one. How do I teach unplugged? And you will also find, this is specifically for the foundation phase teachers, many of the content that you currently already teach, you will find in some of your other subjects already, within life skills, within maths, with patterns, where you need to build certain artifacts, where you work in creative arts, for example, where you need to create something, being creative. So there are a lot of overlap in connecting with other subjects. But as it is, this is a standalone subject. So get an understanding of what is unplugged activities and how it work. And then also, if you at your school is to leverage your available resources. What do I have at the school currently? Without looking outside your school. In terms for the schools that do have computer labs, for example, looking at infrastructure and especially specifically for the grade 4s to grade 9s, how many of the PCs is working? Is my internet working? Can I upload Scratch on that computers? So first start with the infrastructure that you have and see how can you utilize that infrastructure. Also in terms with the foundation phase is to see what do we have? Do we have any of our cups, paper clips, paper, and there's a lot of resources you can actually tap into, which is free, where you can look and see what activities can I do within my unplugged space and what resources can I utilize. So I think in terms of the resourcing is see what do I have at my school and what's expected within the curriculum and what do I need to procure. So when we look at this one, let's look at, for example, the resourcing is to be inclusive. If a school that has limited resources is to see what do I have and how can I utilize that resource to teach problem solving.
Yeah,
I think
that's
also
actually, sorry, that's such a great point to, really look at what you have going for you before you look at a procurement. Ashrik, thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Jackie, keeping in mind that the CAPS curriculum integrates various skills across different subjects, how would you suggest schools encourage collaboration between coding and robotics and these other departments, such as maths or science, so that they can further enhance student learning?
First of all, hi everybody. I do think that starting where you are is the most important thing. I agree so much with Ashrik. Don't run out now and try and feel that you have to have the latest, you have to have laptops, you have to have everything. You can integrate your subject right now. Coding robotics is actually designed and it does actually work across all subjects. Not only, I know we always think of maths and science first, but what I would recommend to teachers is start where you are. For example, most of us teach, I think all of us as teachers, we had other subjects that we taught. So my subject was English. So when I started integrating coding or trying to integrate coding into my lessons, I started with English because I do believe that coding is storytelling. Learning how to code, learning how to sequence. So I would get students to, I would read out a story and I would change the order of how the story happened. And we would decide, does this make a difference or doesn't it? And they would start learning that sequence was important. I found we didn't start with anything. We started with bits and pieces in our classroom, and all junior schools have puzzles. So I visited my colleagues and I borrowed all their puzzles. I brought them into my classroom and I said, okay, using my English sort of teaching background, I thought let them make a puzzle. So the little groups of children got together, they made their puzzles, they were very excited. And then I would come to them and say, well, how did you make the puzzle? And initially it was quite difficult for them to actually explain to me the thought process that went behind making this puzzle. So that's the skill that they're learning as well. These are all the other skills that they're learning. And so what they would eventually figure out is they'd say, well, first thing we did was we put all the colors the right way up. Good. Then the next thing we did was we put all the edges together. Good. And then it said, so I would get a list of what they could do. And then we would discuss what happened if we put things in a different order. Would it matter? So then students are starting to learn that in some circumstances, order matters, and in some it doesn't. So that was English. Another subject that we played around with was as the PE teacher. Now, I'm by no means PE skilled, but we took an idea from a lovely teacher in KZN. Her name was Frances, and she had taken bottle caps and put little arrows and little, she put arrows on and a little backwards jumping one and a little stop that she had drawn onto these bottle caps. And she got the grade R's to make dancers. So they would arrange these bottle caps along the floor, and they would be the roboteer or the person in charge, and their friend was the robot. And the robot had to follow all these little instructions. And in the end, we would have all these little kiddies dancing on the field, but they were learning such an important skill. So it can integrate into anything, but start slowly. Start slowly. Don't try and integrate into everything. And my last point on integration is get buy-in from your colleagues. I so think it's such an important factor that all teachers know. They don't have to know how to do coding robotics, but get them involved. Give them a PD. Tell them what you do in your classroom, and they will come to you with ideas to integrate. Thanks, Demi. I hope that gave you some
Jackie,
tips.
That's amazing. Those are such fantastic and practical ideas to, just help teachers get started. So thank you so much. Lulu, you've got so much of experience with coding and robotics, but what advice might you have for teachers that have never taught coding and robotics before and now need to?
Yeah, I think it's I think that the question around teacher training, obviously, but if you've never done coding or robotics before, I really think this CAPS document is constructed very nicely. If you go through the concepts of computational thinking, I mean, that's the most important thing. And I do think if you familiarize yourself with the terminology, decomposition, debugging, algorithms, you'll actually find out that you're teaching those anyway. So it's not as if you need to understand it even better. And I think the fear around calling it coding and robotics, it's actually just computational thinking, and it is things that we do every day, like making a sandwich, like coming to school. So I wouldn't be afraid, and I think my biggest advice would be find your champion teachers, those people who are trying to implement this. Find your champion teachers, give them time. Give them time to get used to this curriculum and to go through it, because teachers can get very nervous around whether their lesson's going to work or not. And I think if your champions can work together, it's valuable. And then also, there's so many resources available, and that's why you need to give your teachers time. They can watch YouTube videos. Code4Kids has lots of resources. Scratch, so many resources. So yeah, I think just go into it with an open mind and unpack the essence of it so that you really understand it. Remember, you're teaching grade R to 3. I mean, you are not going to do it as an MIT student. You are literally trying to make those very big concepts and break it down decompose them into little bits for your little ones to understand. Thanks, Demi.
That's such amazing advice for teachers, and everybody here appreciates, taking it and breaking it down into those smaller parts. So thank you, Lou, for that. Let's look a little bit deeper into this discussion. There's been a lot of information about the foundation phase curriculum that's been out there for teachers, and the teachers are eager to know more about it. Ashrik, as a professional in the field, what excites you most about the curriculum? And then compared to the draft, how has the final CAPS curriculum changed in terms of its structure, content, learning objectives, and even assessment?
Oh, thank you, Debbie. It's like 5 questions in one, which I will answer as quickly as possible. But I don't want to rush through this question. Just in terms of what excites me about this curriculum, this is a curriculum that has been developed in South Africa by in-house talent with in-house space. It wasn't done through a different organization outside curriculum. So I think that is also very unique in terms of the human resource that drafted this curriculum and all the amount of people over the years that were involved in this. So I think this is a groundbreaking development just in our South African education space with the emphasis which is very much needed on developing 21st century skills among our learners. And in also looking at where does it start? It starts right from grade R and it builds to grade 9. Where our current curriculum, we're focusing on CAT and IT starts in the FET space, which I personally feel is a bit too late, where that learner needs to build the critical thinking and problem solving way before that. So it allows that to build that foundation in terms of the thinking from an early age, from grade 9, that the learners focus on problem solving, critical thinking, be creative, and how to look at the problem. I think that is also very much important. And also, part of the exciting part of this curriculum is our current curriculum, which is very much content-based in terms of the CAPS, where this new curriculum specifically for coding and robotics is very much hands-on. It's practical. Also, it is a process-driven approach to learning, which aligns well if we look global educational trends where education is moving towards. Through that, we can really develop what we need is innovators and entrepreneurial mindset within our learners from a very, very early age. If I look in terms of inclusivity, I think the curriculum is very much inclusive in terms of catering for unplugged as well as the plugged version, looking at our socio-economic such different various backgrounds within South Africa. That was one of the things that we also had a big discussion in terms of we know we need to use devices at some point, but it's not just about devices. It's about the thinking skill that learners need to develop with computational thinking in terms of the abstraction, decomposition, the pattern recognition, and the algorithms. So how do I teach a learner that? This where the coding comes in. And then we look at the robotics, but this is where we're looking at how are we going to solve this problem, applying design thinking processes. So touching on content in structure, we look at the old draft that we had. There we had, I think, 5 strands within foundation phase. And then in the intermediate and senior phase, we had 4 strands. And when you look and compare these 2 curriculums, you will notice that even the strands, their names has changed. So within the new gazetted curriculum, there are only 3 strands, which is coding, robotics, and then we have digital concepts. I think there is also a big change. And the question you're probably going to ask is, why did we make that changes? Couldn't we just leave it as it was? And that was really a big debate. If we look at the old curriculum, there were so many things the learner needed to know, from applications, from Word, from Excel, from creating a video, Then there's the internet skills, the robotic skills, the 3D printing. There's a whole lot of different and various platforms the learner need to learn from an early grade, where we're looking at the coding and robotics new curriculum, which we looked at and especially in terms of how it was structured, keeping in mind um, uh, the progression and how it needs to build. So from that perspective, the coding, robotics, and digital concept set, we need to structure this curriculum in a way that does not, let's say, where there's cognitive overload for a learner in grade 2, where they're exposed to too many things at once. So you will notice the new curriculum, there's a gradual progression in complexity, and they give you in bits and pieces. Because when we look at the approaches of the curriculum, you will see there are 5 approaches in terms of how we need to teach it. In the previous curriculum, the draft, there wasn't that detail on how we must teach coding and robotics. So that 5 approaches, I think, also give guidance to the teacher as well, which is the methodologies, problem-based learning, where we want the learner to solve real-world problems. There's also where the design thinking comes in, where learners need to be innovative in how do I solve this problem, looking at the design thinking process. But you will also notice in the new draft, there's a new way how we crafted the design process with inspiration, ideation, implementation, where we said this is an iterative process. Learners need to go back and forth. It is not A, B, C, D, E, F. No, it shouldn't be like that. So if the learner need to find the inspiration in terms of what is the problem, defining it, speaking to his classmate in terms of what needs, or what the problem is, defining the problem, collaborating, empathizing, and then start designing it and ideating it. So all of that approaches is nicely built in. And then there's group work, cooperative learning, the pair programming, in deliberate practice, where we said the curriculum is competency-based. And how will a learner develop a competency? Through practice and practice and practice until we get mastery. And that's why we say this is a process-driven curriculum, because there are certain processes the learner needs to go through. And then the last one is the science of learning strategies that is also built in with this curriculum. And there's also, the science of learning also played a very important role in the skills progression and what can we give at what stage to the specific learners. That also played a very, very scientific role in how the progression was laid out in terms of that. So I'm not sure if I'm out of time, Debbie.
Well, no, this is, I mean, your insight is most valuable. So if you've got something else to add, please do.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Debbie. I just need to check with the big boss. So colleagues, in terms of the approaches, as I said, it is very much valuable, and think is when we look at the 2 curriculums in the one that we have now, I think it's really a very good product in terms of mastery of skills, but also give guidance in terms of how we need to teach it. And when I talk about, when we talk a process-driven approach, here we actually referring to that this is a learning journey for the learner. It's not just about the final product. It's not just about the house that they has built or the smart home that they have created and the cars executing it perfectly. It's actually before that is identifying the problem, is structuring and finding the answer to that problem, is the collaboration between that learner and the other learner. It's coming together in drawing the problem and then going back again and then speaking to the learner, is that what you mean? Is that what you want? And that's how you see it. And then it is prototyping it. And it is always an iterative process going in that process. I think as a teacher, the final product, yes, we will get there, but it is how we get there. It's very, very important. in the curriculum and how we teach is the process, the computational thinking when we do the coding. Then we have the competencies for robotics when we do the robotics. And then we have the competencies for the digital skills when we do digital skills. And I think in the previous curriculum, that wasn't clearly laid out, was the competencies. In this curriculum, the competencies is very clearly laid out. And that will also touch on the assessment. So what do I assess? For example, look at the coding. Do I want to assess, can the learner apply computational thinking by decomposing a problem? It will be, for example, C1 in the curriculum. If I look at C2, is can I write the code? If it's a learner in the foundation phase, can I use the arrows to pack it? Can I write it? Can I, in the third one is, can I explain the code? So there are different competencies, and all of the competencies comes in with your assessment. The same with the robotics. There's a design thinking process. There's the mimicking that comes in. Can I build it? Do I know the difference between my components? And then we go to the digital skills. So in terms of the competencies alone, when we go to assessment, that will give clear guidance in terms of what are we accessing or what are we assessing at that stage. Thank you, Debbie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashrik. That is, it's fantastic to have such great insight. And the way you've explained it as it being the process is something so crucial and something teachers will really be quite appreciative of. So let's talk about the next step, teachers and for schools. Lulu, we know that keeping students engaged is crucial. What are some of your best practices or suggestions for making this new CAPS Coding and Robotics Curriculum fun and interactive for students of different learning styles?
On mute. Thank you, Debbie. I do think the most important part to make it fun is obviously there's a lot of focus on play, actually built into this curriculum. Finding a treasure, going to the shops, how do you get there, making a sandwich, using art, using crafts. So I do think the curriculum itself inspires quite an interactive space for the students and the teacher. I would do something like definitely have the terminology up somewhere, and make it maybe broken down for them, especially not the younger learners who can't read yet, but maybe have like decomposition, algorithm, and just a little explanation of what those are, because I think those terminologies are difficult for the kids, and I think they can be a little bit overwhelming. So maybe just breaking those down. And maybe a fun thing would be, one day in a week, you enter the classroom and you have to code yourself to your desk. You get a little, you get the arrows, and that's nice for your visual learners, and even learners with difficulties and stuff. And they have to code themselves to their desks, or you have like a treasure in the class that they have to find on that day. And they have to be very specific. They can even create the little blocks themselves. And then I think something very helpful to have in a coding and robotics class are sheets of paper with blocks on them. So that, and that's very easy to make. It costs very little, just a big sheet of paper with blocks on them. And I mean, what I did in my previous school is that they had to find, they were learning time, and they had to find the digital and the analog time. So you put the digital in one space and the analog in another space, and they have to code, it could be a cap or whatever, to get to the digital and then find the analog time. So that's also a nice integration idea. Yeah, I think it's inherent in having fun with the kids, building things, and then just bringing in subtly those little concepts. I know one of my teachers at St. Stithians, she, for instance, uses the very hungry caterpillar. And the kids have to build the caterpillar, and then the caterpillar has to go and find the fruit. And that in itself is a little coding exercise mixed with the literacy, and that's Lerato Shopping. I think she's on this call. So yeah, I think there are many integration ideas and fun that you can have with your kids.
That's such an important point, Lulu, is to have fun with it and to just make it fun for your learners. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Jackie, could you shed some light on how teachers can go about upskilling themselves to teach coding and robotics?
Absolutely. And I have to start off with this. Teachers, you underestimate how good you are at this already. By virtue of the fact that you are teachers, you have done the hard work. The rest of it is fun that you can learn as you go. And so I would say just give yourself that credit, first of all. And the second thing is upskilling. A lot of people feel that we need to wait for other people to upskill us. What I recommend is don't wait for that. Start now. Start accessing the free resources that are out there. I know we have tons of free resources, and there are tons online. Start slowly. You don't have to start. I know one of the questions that came from teachers was, I'm not going to be able to do this. I've got to learn HTML. I've got to learn Scratch. And for now, and they didn't know how to install the programs, etc., etc. To put you at ease, you don't need HTML right now. You don't need it for a very, 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 very long time. And in terms of Scratch is block coding. And as Astrid says, there are many different ways to teach block coding. In fact, if you don't have access to computers or you don't have enough for your kids, there is a fantastic website. And if anybody's interested, I'll pop the link in, that allows you to actually download little blocks offline. They're quite nice sizes. You can color them in, and they've actually got instructions for games. So how to play the games, and you are teaching your students. So they use the little blocks so that when they do get to the stage, or when you get to the stage, when you've had time to teach yourself a bit more Scratch, you've already got those basic skills that you have learned. So be patient with yourself. Go slowly. Don't try to learn every single thing in computer science. Just start with the little bit. Start with the free resources. In fact, I think we have a term that is free. So use that first. Don't invest in anything. Start with that. See what you like and pick out what you like for the next year.
Thank you, Jackie. That's such a great point, is to look for those free resources, because there are plenty of them out there, and starting small. So earlier this week, we sent out a form for teachers to submit their burning questions about the CAPS curriculum. The following were the 3 most frequently asked questions. And just a reminder to everyone in the audience, we are keeping an eye on the questions that come through the webinar Q&A. So if you do have any questions, we are going to get to it. Please pop them in the Q&A tab. But actually, a question that many teachers are eager to have answered is if coding and robotics will ever be implemented as an assessment subject. And if so, when can they expect this?
Thank you, Debbie. It was one of the questions I received, I think, a day or 2 back as well, in a discussion that we had. In the curriculum, if you look in section 4, they touch on assessment. The way we would like the coding and robotics to be assessed is, because they should get, like we assess normally, we have our informal assessment, and then we have our summative assessment as well. So with the informal assessment, we do curriculum at the back, section 4, we look at formative assessment. This is your ongoing assessment through the projects, through the portfolios, through the practical tasks. And that is what we really would like and push through. At this point, we still have our normal way of assessment, the formative and summative, where there will be a test as well that learners need to write, standardized test. And then is the one that I refer to is the project itself, and it is the rubric at this point. So for the foundation phase, which implements next year, the discussion at this point is what we would love to have is to have it in a more informal way of assessing it through observation, through the projects, through the journey the learner go through. That is not 100% finalized yet at this stage. At this stage is still the old way of how things is currently done in our assessment space, where there's a small test they need to write, but the majority of that assessment will be done through the rubric kind of assessment, where we look at the journey of the learner. And I think it's very important to look at that section for the teacher as well. And I think because we're looking now at a project-based learning or problem-based learning, there's also a new method of teaching. And with it is also the upskilling that needs to come with it. And how do I do that assessment? Or how do I go about applying that kind of assessment through my rubric, through my checklist? And I think in the foundation phase, they are already quite clued up, especially in the grade R, where they already have that kind of assessment, which is part of what they do. So yes, in short, from next year, the foundation phase will start. They will implement, and there will be an assessment section attached to that. For now, work according to section 4, and there is a clear rubrics. I think when we send the final one out in terms of how it will look like, there will be more meat in terms of that of the rubrics, as well as how it needs to be assessed. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Ashrik. That makes, you know, a lot of sense to assess through observations, especially in the foundation phase. Lulu, a big question that teachers have is how to accommodate students with learning disabilities. I know you touched on this a little bit on how to have some ideas, but how do you navigate coding in the classroom with students that struggle to read and write?
I do think you can use symbols. I quite believe in a classroom it's quite nice to have stations, especially with coding and robotics. I think you can set up certain spaces for certain kids, and where you do have writing, you know, I think that the curriculum will really help develop these skills for the kids, just by telling stories, by telling you know, how they're walking and or how they're making a sandwich, will already deal with a lot of those problems. But I think at this stage in grade R to 3, using symbols and using pictures is very, very valuable. That is colorful. You move the picture around. You have your directionality, your arrows. And then, I mean, it is always important to then speak about what you are doing. But I think this curriculum can work very nicely with kids with learning disabilities, and even strengthening those disabilities very much, because it's not an academic subject, and it's not I am now reading, or I am now doing maths, or I am now doing an oral for my teacher. It is within play that they get the opportunity to engage with these things. And I think that's a plus for this curriculum.
Thanks, Lulu. That's such an amazing point, is, you know, using symbols and using visual cues to help students struggling. Absolutely, coding is one of those things that are meant to enhance other skills like reading and writing. So, you know, it'll come naturally. Jackie, one of the big questions we have is time for training, time for implementation. What would be your advice for teachers that are nervous about how long it takes to train themselves to become ready to teach coding and robotics?
I love this question. Let me just tell you first up, we've got 3 teachers here. You're never going to be fully trained in coding and robotics, because the very second you think, right, I've got a handle on this, I know exactly what I'm doing, a new app will come out, a new technology will come out, something that is the nature of coding robotics, and that's why we love it. So when you are looking for training, start slowly. Start by looking at little things online. Training, there is formal training. I know the universities and the teaching diplomas are now adding a little bit of coding robotics into it, but make use of all these kinds of seminars and all these kind of webinars, because everyone has little bits of information that will make you a better coding and robotics teacher. But don't ever worry about being an expert. None of us are experts. That word doesn't exist in the coding and robotics world. So just keep on going. Don't give up, and don't be afraid to say, I do not know what I'm doing. The coding robotics community of teachers are amazing. Get yourself on. There's a Facebook group, and I don't know if that teacher is here. I think her name is Caitlin Getty. She's got a really amazing Facebook group that she's just started for those exact questions. And every time training comes up, everybody lets each other know, and they share this information. We love sharing information as coding teachers. We love it. So that's the best way. Network with other teachers and train up yourselves as you go. Thanks, Demi.
Thanks, Jackie. I think that puts a lot of teachers at ease about, trying to fully understand everything or learn everything all at once. Thank you all for your great feedback. So let's move on to some of our live questions, and I'm going to start with quite an important one, Ashrik, for you. I think a lot of questions are going to be directed towards you, but Jackie and Lulu, please feel free to in at any point. Ashrik, like I said with Jackie, a big question is around time. And from the chat, we see timelines for implementation is such a big question. So when will this CAPS Coding and Robotics Curriculum for grade R to 3 become compulsory for all schools?
Thank you, Debbie, and a very important question as well as an exciting question. As you know, the curriculum has been gazetted, which means it's now officially approved by DBE and is becoming now an official subject as well. So when we look at the implementation process and the rollout plan of coding and robotics nationally, so what we have now for grade R to 3 is earmarked for 2025, next year, foundation phase. So it is grade R to grade 3 next year in foundation phase. And then we look at an incremental or phased in approach. So 2026 will be then grade 4, and then we will build until grade 9 until 2031. But as you know, it doesn't stop a school. So in between that, there are pilot programs that's nationally being run as well that will continue. But it doesn't stop a school to start integrating it and start implementing it. It's only compulsory next year for the foundation phase. But you know what? It also gives us time to prepare the system to get ready. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Ashrik. That's time is always something teachers want to know about, and that's a great way to put it. So there also seems to be a lot more emphasis on coding component in the curriculum. How important will the robotics be?
Debbie, I lost you now for a few seconds. I didn't get the whole question. Can you just repeat the question, please?
Sorry. So there seems to be a lot of emphasis on the coding component. Mm-hmm. How important will the robotics component be?
Right. So if you look at the curriculum, and there's a progression in terms of the amount of time is spent in the early grades, in where it builds up into grade 9 in terms of time. So in the beginning, there's an emphasis on the coding part, especially from grade R, I think, in grade 4 as well. In grade 5, it starts getting more to robotics. But there's a lot of overlap between the robotics as well as the coding. Because what I do in robotics, I can't just build a structure and the structure can't move. So it is often integrated. So that learner will get basically exposure when they do the building process. For example, let's say In the robotics, we have the competencies, and in the coding, we have competencies. But on the curriculum, there is certain time already dedicated for each of these sections. If I look at the time dedicated to it for foundation phase, if I now just quickly under correction, is 1 hour for grade R to grade 1. And if you take that 1 hour per term, so per week, per term, per week, and then in the higher phases, it's 2 hours per week. How many of the 2 hours is spent on coding? How many is spent on robotics? And how many is spent on? But there is also in the curriculum, I think the time in how you do it. It doesn't mean I must do it a certain way. I must just cover all the hours like we're currently doing the curriculum, must be covered. But the robotics section, to get back to your question, is as important because there we do the electronics. This is the design thinking process that process. How do I start? How do I define a problem? How do I create the correct question to solve the right problem? Then there's the design thinking. So all of that collaboration and communication and that iterative approach of creating the prototype is built into that robotics bit. And that is, I'm just getting excited in terms of knowing the kind of learner that we're gonna get out of this curriculum in terms of looking forward. We have a shortage on entrepreneurial mindset in terms of the learners we're currently creating. I mean, with this curriculum in terms of the process that is, the methodologies that is built in here, I mean, after that learner leave grade 9 in terms of how they think, especially where the robotics comes in, is the problem solving, defining a problem, and then working through that problem, creating a solution that can actually work.
Thank you, Ashrik. That's absolutely like fantastic, and I'm sure that puts a lot of teachers at ease. I know there are so many questions, and an hour goes by before we can even blink. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all our panelists for joining us today, for sharing their insights. For the audience, we've learned so much already today about this newly released CAPS Coding and Robotics Curriculum. But I know there's still lots more to come. So what comes next from our side? Following this webinar, we will send you an email with all the resources that we've discussed today, as well as the winners of the giveaway, which I'll talk about in a minute. And read through these resources really will be most valuable to you as you embark on me. Code4Kids will also be hosting some online sessions next month that will be more practical, hands-on workshops exploring how to bring the curriculum to your classroom. So keep an eye out for more information about these, and don't forget to join our mailing list to keep updated on what comes next. Lastly, a massive thank you, Ashrik, Jackie, and Lulu, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us today. And a really big thank you to all our attendees for sharing your questions and for joining us this afternoon. I know that a lot of questions are still to be answered. So if your questions haven't been answered, please do not worry. We will have the Code4Kids team answering these questions or doing our very best to get the answers from industry experts and to send them to you. We'll also be sharing a Google form in the chat with you so that you can pop in any questions that you might have that really wasn't answered. You can also please make use of our CEO Matthew's email address that is shared with you in the chat. It'll also be popped out there shortly, and we really will get to your questions. There's a lot I know that still needs